to What the Hex, your source for Warhammer Underworlds and under 30 defeats at the hands of your kids. Today's episode, we're going to be talking about the new starter set and introducing new players to Underworlds. Before we get going here, some quick context for when we're recording. It's about 2 weeks since the last Forsaken and Restricted list dropped, so hopefully if you had a chance to check those out, give them a try, see what you think with your new decks. With us tonight, to help us get that new player perspective, we've got Aaron. Aaron, how you doing?
I'm pretty good. Excited to be on the podcast.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Just fit it in on all your other guest spots on other podcasts.
Yeah, I hope we don't go too long. I do have a couple others later on.
All right.
Well, we'll try not to keep you. All right. So, as always, we have our couple things that we like to hit before we get to our main topic, and we can hear about Aaron's perspectives on this starter set. We'll start with some community shoutouts. Davey, have you got any community shoutouts?
Yeah, I do. So the idea of this episode is that it's going to be sort of a capsule. If you have somebody who's kind of thinking about getting in or that you want to convince to get in, this is going to be something you can hand them. Like, here's what the deal is with Underworlds, and here's what the deal is with the starter set, and then they can make their decision with some extra information. Another good resource for that is John Wynn Reese's Can You Roll a Crit blog. He's got it pinned to the very top, Getting Started with Underworlds. We will, of course, have the link in our show notes, but if you want to figure out where it is, like, literally post anywhere on the internet that you're wondering how to get started in Underworlds, and it magically summons him, and he posts, he starts plugging his stuff. So, I mean, it's usually like 2 posts in whatever forum it happens to be in, and he'll figure it out and arrive and link it. So
He has been summoned.
Yeah. There's one other one that I'm going to save for later because it is not quite fully spun up, but Mandarga, you're working on your project on Reddit. I see you. We're gonna talk more about what you got in a little bit. So it's good stuff. More to follow on that. What about you, Phil? You got anything?
Just to go along with the Getting Started article from Can You Roll a Crit? I believe, I haven't checked in a while, but I believe Well of Power, done by the same folks over at Path to Glory, still has a compilation of a whole bunch of different resources for Underworlds, different web pages, blogs, pretty much anything you could want for the game, I think, is still housed there. So if you want a good, like, show me all the things all the resources, that is a place to wade in deep if you want to find all the information in one spot.
Rad.
Yeah. Well, I won't ask you, Aaron, knowing that you probably don't have any current community shoutouts. But this next section maybe will be more applicable. Our What the Hex is Going On with You section. So this is our section where we talk about any sort of hobbying or gaming that we're currently doing. So have you been up to anything?
Yeah, latest obsessions, whatever game. Usually we're doing Underworlds on this, but why don't you fill us in with what you guys been jamming on?
Well, we've so I have a household with 3 boys, and I'm a teacher, so I'm home in the summer. So we usually start our mornings off with some sort of gameplay, and we're currently doing some Smash Up, which we played. My oldest son and I played a long time ago, and he's been referencing it, and like, I wish we did it as like a, try it out at the game store. And so it was his birthday, so I was like, all right, I'll pick this up. This looks pretty fun, and so we've been playing that a lot, and that has been a lot of fun. But my 2 twin sons are afraid to attack my older son. So I'm just like, what are you guys doing? Like, he's so far ahead. Why are you still attacking me? And they're like, because Sal will get us back. And I'm like, ah. So it's a little frustrating.
Awesome. How about you, Davey?
Uh, for me, it's been some prep. In what can only be described as an act of desperation. Team England recruited me for their team as a mercenary. So I'll be representing the just in time for the 4th of July. I'm
Yeah.
representing England. Uh, um, it was no, it was cool. Those guys recruit me. It was fun to like hop on and then like you could scroll up in the thread and they're like, "How about this guy? No, he's busy. How about this guy? No, he's
Oh
playing for someone
boy.
else." like I'm just glad to make the list though. So and I'll be bringing Rippa's Snarlfangs. So
Oh,
uh,
nice.
hanging out with those. Yeah.
Well,
So
you did well for the last team that you repped with Ripas, so
I did.
hopefully that lightning can strike twice.
Yeah, we'll see. So we got one
Do
of
you?
one of the French teams is up first. So well, I think I've got a Skaven matchup, Rats, and I'm a little. I looked at it. It's open lists, which I've never seen before. So
Oh.
I know exactly the list I'm playing against, and it looks gross. So we'll see how it goes.
Interesting.
What about you, Phil?
Cool. Well, I've not been doing a ton with Underworlds other than running our local league. We had our second week there. Um, been decent turnout so far, considering. We've had 5 people show up each time, so that's pretty good. I feel.
Mm.
And then also we are kicked off our what man I am blanking right now. Warcry League. So
Oh,
for
right.
folks who like doing some more narrative play in the Warhammer universe, that is a smaller game. Kick that off as well at our local Games Workshop store. Um, and my understanding is that we're going to be doing a Path to Glory campaign series and at the same shop as well that I'm hoping to be able to participate in. So going to be
Nice.
busy in a bunch of different systems.
Yeah, and I think I heard Paven and Josh are thinking about starting up another season of Dogs of Warcry. So they're
Oh my
they're in
goodness.
the they're the planning phases for that wildly popular uh, show. So
Yeah.
when we get some more concrete, we'll let you know here as well.
Yeah, we'll get people links. I know that there's at least in our Discord, there's lots of people who've sort of been bugging them to be like, when are you going to record another episode?
Yeah, totally.
I think they might be one of, if not the only podcast for that game. So, guys, if you're listening to us, I think give the people what they want. But that should be good. All right, so that'll bring us around here to our overall main topic. So as I said, we're going to be talking starter set. We're going to be talking to Aaron some of his uh, thoughts on the starter set as a new entrant into the Underworlds, just to get an idea of the overall view of the starter set itself, and then also just sort of talk through learning the game and some of the sort of, I don't know, pitfalls, if you will, of
Mm.
trying to figure this game out. So
Yeah.
where
Before
should we
we
start?
before we jump in, we'll get a quick intro from Aaron here.
Oh,
So
sure, of course.
Aaron, I know you from playing lots and lots of different board games. I think I've referenced it on this a few times. There's the annual game cabin. Are we 4 years into that now?
Yep.
Okay.
I was just thinking about that.
And so head out for the weekend, make a lot of good food, play a lot of games. I think we've managed to set a quantity of games record each year. What was our last? Were we
Okay.
20?
I think I've lost. I think it's in the. I don't think we've hit 30, but I think we
We're
were
just shy
high
of. Yep.
20s. High
Yeah.
20s. And there's a
Wow.
constant debate: should we play less games and get really deep into the games, or just continue on our speed game playing ways? So
Yeah. So there's room for evolution. And actually, one of these is the one and only time I think prior to this starter set you've had exposure to Underworlds. At the time, it was just just Shadespire. I think it was just our very first year. We did a 4-player, set up a big board. Uh,
The best way to
famous.
learn this game.
It was not. It was not shining at its most. At its best. I know one of the guys in our group famously despised the game after that. We had Carrie running Garrick's Reavers, and I think they were all dead, like except for one after like the first round. So he was like, "Well, what am I supposed to do now?" Like, ugh. Just
Well,
Play cards.
bide your time. I don't know.
yes, every time I play the game now, I think back on that game, and I just remember, Davey, you had the rats, which I don't know anything about, but I know that you played like, it felt like about 15 cards every turn, and your rats could do all sorts of things. And I had the big Celestials, maybe is that their name? And I was so far out that I was spending every turn just trying to move closer to the action and never attacking anybody.
Yeah.
Which actually works okay for those guys sometimes, just not dying. Yeah. So if you were to kind of list off a few games that you're kind of some of your favorites all time and these days, what would you throw out?
Well, I mean, you guys in the Game Cabin group introduced me to Imperial Assault, and that I think at that point I went from being kind of like a Target game buyer, or it's like, what's the game at Target that people buy, like Settlers of Catan or something like that, to like I can now go to the game store and not just be confused about what's at the game store. I can like look at an end cap and be like, that's my jam right there. And so yeah, Imperial Assault definitely was the game that brought me in to like miniatures and all of the strategy games.
Wow. So it's been like 4 years from like buying at Target to trolling what crowdsourcing websites for like seeing what you can kickstart. I think you
right. Yeah, I love the Kickstarter campaigns. Well, and I think I like that first Game Cabin. I don't know that I brought any games really. I might have brought. I don't know if we played any games that I brought.
Yeah.
And now I'm the one that has to like be careful with how many games I bring. Like, Aaron, there's no more room for more games. So
control yourself.
Right.
Cool. And I play a bunch with the kids. I've been doing a lot of that actually. Even today. We were trying some stuff out with the kids, so we do a little trading back and forth too. But you're here not just on your own behalf, but your oldest was your partner in playing. So there's a couple times where we're gonna have you fill in with some of his answers as well. So
yeah, he's the only one that can read right now, so he plays the games where that is required. So.
Yeah. Excellent.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. So let's do the game over. And before, Phil and I have played this for a long time, like, since the start, basically. So our attempt to like summarize what this game is gets pretty convoluted. If you were to try to summarize this game for somebody from the outside, I think I asked for if Sal could describe the game, and you. So how would you describe this game to somebody who is unaware?
Well, Sal said it was his sentence was complicated but fun.
All right,
and he said,
that's fair.
Yeah. And I actually did like his answer. It's like there was so many different parts and so many things going on that it was hard to know everything, but figuring that out was the fun part.
Cool.
And I think I would say, like, I don't know, it's a good, just like, I've only played it I think 4 times now, and it's just fun to try and kill things. Like that's
Sure.
it's a game where I get to kill things, and that's roll dice and kill things. So
awesome. Yeah. So I think if somebody's got some reference points from outside. Let's say like a hex based miniatures game. There's a deck building component. That one I was trying to figure out I guess you'd call it a living card game because there's no random
Yeah.
element, right?
Yeah, it's more like there's like a Marvel one where that's similar.
Yeah.
And
Champions, Marvel Champions.
Yeah.
yeah, I think that's it.
We played a Cthulhu one that was really hard, and
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. There's been a number of these living card games where you know what cards you're getting ahead of time. And I think that's the big difference, is that it doesn't have randomized cards, which I think is, I mean, depending on your perspective, that's both a pro and a con, maybe.
Sure.
Yeah.
I think I drew a parallel. If you're someone who's familiar with Imperial Assault Skirmish, you have miniatures, but also a set of cards that are affecting the game. Here, your team is kind of pre-built, although you have a ton of factions to pick from, and then you have the deck building component. And then another one our group got into is Unmatched. Aaron, actually, that's an Aaron introduction. He brought that to us, and there you have like a kind of a pre-built team, although they're much smaller. There's only one to five people, like a fighter and their sidekicks, and then a locked-in deck. The deck doesn't ever change, with I think the exception of like one fighter can have some components change. But so those, if you're familiar with those, there's some comparisons you could draw there. So.
Yeah, and I mean, the tactics of it are really like trying to figure out what like that's been the fun part. Like I'm trying to figure out what tactics work with my team and what tactics that Sal is trying to throw at me when he's playing the other side. So
yeah. So that actually segues pretty nicely here into our next section.
Go for it.
Yeah. So this next piece that we've got here is sort of talking about like, so we have what is the game, but how do you actually win the game? And obviously, for folks who know the game, you know that you're trying to score what is called glory. But so you get glory in a couple different ways, but the main ones is getting glory from getting kills, for taking other fighters out, which sounds like that's maybe Aaron's favorite part. And then you, like you said, the strategy part where you have your deck of objective cards, where you're trying to figure out, what do I want to do to score glory, and what is my opponent trying to do, and how can I try and deny them? So I guess our question that we've got here is, how did you feel about each sort of part of that, trying to win the game, in your few games that you got to try out?
Yeah, well, I think like what I've really enjoyed about the game is, so I always play the are they the Celestials? Am I saying that right? Or
I think they're
Stormcaster.
Yeah.
Okay, right.
Yeah.
So I play those guys, and so I have my three sort of long range fighters, and then I have Sleek, the little sort of support animal that for me runs all over the board, and I like to upgrade him because he can make my other three guys do cool things.
Nice.
And kind of what I've noticed is that as I pull my objectives, I get my 3 objectives. These are the things you can accomplish to win glory points. And then I get my 5, what are they called?
Power cards.
Power cards. It's sort of like I start to build like, okay, well, this is what this round needs to look like. I need to move these guys. And it's sort of a little puzzle, I feel like, that each round I have to unlock. To figure out how I can get usually like 1 objective, maybe like 2 is incredible. And then there's sort of this series of like either dice rolls that I'm really excited about, or I am just facing constant disappointment where I just see my plans just unravel rather quickly. And so,
oh man, especially with Storm of Celestis, who are like really want to land those shots to inspire, and they.
Man, yeah.
So,
Only getting one every round for fighter. It's like, oh, you miss those shots and it hurts.
yeah.
Yeah, it does. It feels like, well, okay, that was my first action. Now I'm in trouble. Let's see what else I can put together because old Aphis the Brave missed his shot. So
So that's you've got your objective deck, and that's kind of giving you, like you said, it's giving you the other set of things that you have to do, and it might be standing in particular spots or performing particular actions or rolling a particular thing. And so yeah, that's when you've got it, when you've got that in your hand, you've got to build that plan. I like that you said it was a solving the puzzle, because I've seen that actually from some uh, very veteran players, like I think Jonathan over on Path to Glory. Like, he uses that term a lot when he's talking about
Yeah.
setting up his turn, so or cracking the code on a particular warband. So that's
yeah,
cool that it came across in four games.
cool,
So
cool.
Yeah. So I think that leads us pretty well into continuing to talk about what's in the decks. Like, what do we get here? So as we talked about, you have your objective deck, um, and we've sort of mentioned it here, but this box comes with two pre-built warbands, or well, two pre-built decks for two warbands, and then the models for those warbands. So we've got the Stormcast Eternals, and we've got some ghosts. So we've got Dreepers, Wraith Creepers, and oh man, I don't
Storm
remember
of
the
Celestis, I think they are.
Storm of
Yeah,
Celestis.
yeah.
I just couldn't remember his name. And so each of them has pre-built decks. So the nice thing, or I guess I shouldn't say that, Aaron, how did you feel about there being pre-built decks for you to use straight out of the box?
Well, I really appreciated that. It just took kind of that like I also play Destiny a lot, that Star Wars
Sure.
dice game, and Pokemon, because all my kids love Pokemon, and so that's, you have to go through the process of building and like, how many of these do I need, and is this going to be balanced? And then usually you're playing a couple games where you're like, well, I blew that call, like I'm completely unbalanced, my deck makes no sense. So that was really nice not to have to do that, and just like every card that came up was probably, I feel like every time I pull a card, it's applicable for in some way. So I
Sure.
really appreciated the pre-built decks.
Yeah, I remember one of our game cabins, we tried doing a Destiny draft. We had a whole bunch, and I had not played very much. And I think I got kind of grouchy part of the way through. I'm like, I don't know what's going on. Like, I have no idea what I'm building. And, like, I guess I'll just throw this stuff together. And I had exactly that, where then we were playing with them afterwards. I'm like, well, this was just absurd that I put this in. So that's good. Like you
Exactly.
said, there's a lot going on in this game. And so it's a good place to start. And it's a gives a fine game to have them pre-built, and once you're more comfortable, you can start branching out a little. Phil,
Well,
you talk about what's in those decks, or
Sure. Yeah. So I mean, as as uh, as we talked about, you've got your objective deck. So you've got 12 objectives for each of these warbands. And then you've also got their power cards. And so you get 10 of each type of power card. So the different types of power cards being that you've got ploys that you can play, well, gambits, I guess, specifically. But for folks who are wanting to dive further into the game, there's actually two different types of gambits. And each of these decks only comes with ploys. They don't rely on any spellcasters, so you don't get any of the spell cards. And I think that's just they just leave that out because it's an extra type of dice, and it's just one extra layer that you don't have to worry about to start things off. So you get your 10 gambits, which are only ploys, and then you get your 10 upgrades. And so I guess it bears mentioning that to play your upgrades, you do have to pay glory to be able to pay your upgrades. So, Aaron, in your few games you got to try out, how did it sort of feel as you started to build up through the game, playing upgrades, playing ploys? Did you start to like feel out like when it made sense to upgrade which fighter? I know you mentioned upgrading the Griffhound and giving him
Yes.
some bonuses.
Yeah, well, I'm so far like what I've noticed about the Stormcasters is there are some upgrades that I'm like, well, do I need more range on these guys? I feel like I cannot like range 4, like all right, I guess. And then so there's a few cards that I'm like, I think I'm missing the reasoning here of why these are in here, some of these. And so yeah, so I kind of just upgrade as much as I can because I'm not sure exactly what to do. But the one that I've sort of been able to understand a little better is the Griffhound and his upgrades. The Loyal Companion upgrade is, I think, my favorite because it lets me. I get to move him like when it's not his turn, which usually, I guess, one of
Yeah.
the like capturing the objectives and capturing like certain spots on the board
Yeah.
can be really hard with these guys because they only have I feel like it's hard. Like they only have a movement of 3, and I always feel like I'm either on the place where I need to go or I'm one short. And so the Griffhound lets me sort of push people around or like catch up with people to jump on those spots or catch up with my other guys. So I guess I like the upgrades that give me more options.
Solid. Yeah. Well, it's fun hearing like the sort of perspectives you've been able to build off of these first few games out of the starter box, because you're like starting to see how some of these cards can like work together to help you build towards your strategy, and then also having some of these cards where it's like, why is this even in here? And I think, and I mean, maybe Davey, you've got a different perspective, but I think there are some cards in all of the pre-built decks that are just kind of like, it's here for flavor, and it's not really necessarily helping you towards your end goal.
Yeah, I think so. And that's some of the next step is figuring out which cards you cull, which cards you drop in favor of something else. And some are in their, in the current configuration, not all that useful, but if you were to combine them with something else, then all of a sudden they do get. So that's kind of the next.
Yeah. I do get a feeling like either I don't know what the strategy is or yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's fair. Like, I think it takes a little while to start to be able to put together a more coherent strategy than I'm just going to play my cards and hopefully be able to like kill all my opponent's guys. And I think that's where you're supposed to start, really. Like, you just get the feel for the basic mechanics. And I guess maybe just as a question, like how do you feel you came out getting the basic mechanics figured out through playing just the starter set? Does it feel like it had enough there for you to start to get a good grasp of the basic mechanics?
Yeah, actually, I like just learning the like the roles, like what is a crit, and if they have a crit, and what if we don't have any crits, and what's the half shield symbol and the full like figuring out the roles. I think is what slows me down the most. And even I would say like at this point, whenever a card comes up that says like you can get cleave on this next roll, I mean that's like at this point for me is like too far, where I'm just like, all right, we're gonna have to go to the glossary. I don't know. Cleave.
Yeah.
The problem is my son seems to be able to pick up and remember all of that stuff on his first exposure, which it takes me about 4 exposures. So he's like, it means this. And I'm like, okay, well, I just want to check. And so he rolls his eyes like, all right, you can check. And,
fun.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's an interesting point, because when the game first came out, they didn't have as much shorthand. They wrote a lot of the rules longhand on all the cards. And so it meant having a lot more just sort of wasted or duplicated text. And I think they've been trying to streamline, but as you say, it then also means there's a lot more of that lexicon that you really have to get like in your head, because then you're like, oh man, here's this keyword that I know is supposed to mean something to me. Let
Yeah.
me go find my rule
Right,
book so I
right,
can
yeah.
figure out what that means.
Yeah. I think the other thing is that the very first release, the season one Shadespire, the complexity of those warbands was substantially lower than these. I mean, the Wraith Creepers
Yeah,
have a
no,
lot of
that's true.
reaction. They're surfing all over the place. Like, it's no wonder that you feel like the Storm of Celestis are pretty slow when you've got the Wraith Creepers like just going
Scooting
wherever they
everywhere.
want to go. It feels like most of the time, you know.
Yeah.
So it's interesting. I would say, like, when I saw this come out, I was like, oh, wow, it's kind of a bold move. They put more reactions and more special text on there than I might have expected for what's supposed to be the like an evergreen. So this is supposed to be always legal in all formats, and it's supposed to always be there
Hmm.
from season to season to for people to get in. This is like the stepping off point.
So I guess this is actually something I was curious about. And it's pretty well related to this topic. Was there anything about the game while you were playing and learning that you felt like it's like, man, this is just, it's over my head. I can't quite figure out what this means, or like there's this rule that we know we're supposed to be using, but it's just like maybe not being clarified enough.
Yeah, I'm still like I get when I do my action, like I do my move or my charge. Got that, but then there's that. Is it called the power step? Like
Yep.
that part. Like I'm like, all right, I know things are supposed to be happening, and I feel like that's when I play my gambit, my ploy, maybe my upgrade cards. I'm not sure exactly how that's supposed to work because it seems like there's a lot of cards that are, trying to coach me on like immediately after or at during your power step, and so I feel like I should have a stronger grasp on that, but I feel like every time I get to the power step, I'm kind of flipping through the rule book to be like, now, is it his turn? Is it my turn? Do we just keep going? How
Sure.
many of these can I do? Because I feel like the first
Yeah.
time I played Davey, he played like 15 cards during this step. I don't remember how that works, but
Yeah.
yeah, that part's been hard to it's constantly confusing to me. So,
Sure. Uh, well, yeah, that's interesting because I think that is one of the things that takes a while to figure out is just, and that goes along with the deck building too, uh, because eventually you're starting to like plan out what cards you want to play as you're building the deck to say like, well, I know I can play these in this time and this, and
mm-hmm.
it's going to work towards this stuff. Um, so I guess, do you feel like, I mean, after playing, it sounded like 4 games, do you feel like you're wanting to start to branch into the deck building aspect so you can start to like plan out the cards, or do you feel like you're not quite there yet?
Well, I think so. Sal, my son, asked for. He said, "Hey, for my birthday, get me a war band." And so I went, and I didn't really know what I was doing, but I picked one out that looked kind of cool, which was the Grima's Snarl Fangs, which I think Dave you were talking about earlier,
Yeah.
which
Yeah.
seems like maybe it was a good pick. But then I was just kind of before the podcast, I started looking through the deck and I was like, there's these guys have some cool stuff. Like it looks like some multiple attacks and some poisoning. Like I'm not exactly sure how it works, but I am, but Sal's going to beat me up with them. So I don't know why I'm excited about it, but I guess I'm excited to get trashed by my son. So,
Hey, it's all in the name of the game, right?
but yeah, as I
Awesome.
start to kind of learn I can see the excitement of picking up a new warband and being like, oh my God, this guy does these things, which I've never even thought about before. So
Yeah, that's where that like you were saying earlier, like the puzzle. Because to me, it's like each new warband is like, okay, here's a new puzzle that I get to work on.
yeah,
Like the puzzle of the deck to put together, and then like how do they actually, because some can get pretty complicated. Rippers is an interesting one. They have some real powerful cards,
yeah,
but it's because like on the face of it, the fighters themselves are maybe not great until they upgrade. They're kind of they look like they don't do all that much until you actually start to
yeah.
unlock them, and they really kind of unfold for you. So yeah, that's kind of the fun is when you're ready for a new puzzle, you just kind of scoop another warband up.
Mm-hmm.
and maybe, I don't know if you're starting to feel like, okay, I've played these guys like this many times, maybe I want to try something new. But I do feel like that's maybe one of the fun aspects of this game, is once you have a larger stable of warbands, you can be like, well, I'm tired of playing this play style, I want to try something different. And then you can play something that's completely on the other end of the spectrum in terms of what you're trying to do. I feel like it can help keep the game fresh. And I don't know if you've like passed warbands back and forth to try and get that different experience, or has it pretty much been stay in your lane and keep keep working on the same one warband?
Well, so far I've just been working with the Stormcasters. Just I get because it's still sort of like this process of like disappointment for me as I go through my turn, where I'm like, oh, well, I really played that poorly, and I was 4 away. I thought I was 3. Like that was like, so I'm still like trying to figure them out. Or I think Sal is definitely ready to move on to other guys. Like he seems to have come up with his strategy, and I think he's ready for new strategies. And
Awesome.
I'm not there, so he loads up the Viceroy and just has the Viceroy come and chop up all my guys. Is kind of what his move is.
That sounds about right.
Yeah, I was gonna say that sounds familiar.
Yeah. I'm
I've
always
been
like
on the receiving
what?
end of that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome. So that pretty much gets us to a lot of the stuff like that's in the box. The only other things that we haven't really talked about are the boards and tokens and such. So I guess one other piece of learning this game is understanding how you set up the boards. Uh, how did that process go for you and your son? Did you feel like you started to like integrate the board into your strategy, or was it more just like, I know I need a board, so I'm just going to put a board down?
Well, yeah, I could definitely recognize like looking at the boards, like those the spots where you can't move, and like
Yeah.
the placement at the beginning. I'm like, okay, I should be thinking about certain things, certain tactics here, but I'm not there yet. And that, I think, even like pulling pulling everything out of the box. Davey kind of warned me. He's like, what, like there's the lore stuff, don't get, that's a lot. So you don't have to get into it. And I'm like, he didn't know what he's talking about. I'm going to read this lore. And of course I read it and was like, what is happening? I'm like, oh man,
Fair.
this seems, yeah. So that I think after reading that, I was like, okay, I'm in trouble. And then, and some in the way the rule book does, they kind of go with like paragraphs to explain things, which sometimes can get hard. Like, okay, I've got this paragraph of stuff. Like, I'm not sure what I need out of this paragraph. Like, I don't think I need everything. So there's a process of kind of figuring out. But I watched, Watch It Played, I think, and that was really helpful. And once to like help me figure out how to set up the board and like set up all the tokens and everything. So that, yeah, I kind of went in over my head and then had to sort of rewind and watch some videos.
Sure.
Yeah, but no, not incorporating any strategy through the board at this point.
Sure.
Did you feel like there was, so the box comes with 2 double-sided boards, so you essentially have 4 choices of boards. Do you feel like that was enough to get you started? I think, if I remember correctly, back, wind the wheels back, way back when, that the original starter set only came with, did it come with just 1 board?
I had to come with 2 because otherwise you couldn't play. You gotta be able to. It was 2.
You're right.
2 double-sided.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah. So it's the same, I guess. But did you feel like it was enough variety for you to I guess that's the other question there. Is like, was there enough to play with?
I think, yeah, I think so. I think at this point it would be anything more would be probably like it would just be like extra stuff that I wouldn't, just I would slowly start to understand why they would include more variety.
Mm,
But definitely through these first four games, I what they've provided in terms of the board and choices there is fine
yeah,
or is good.
Yeah.
yeah.
I mean,
I,
just as we're talking, I'm starting to think about, well, maybe I should think about where I set people up at the beginning.
there is a lot of depth in the strategy of how you set up the boards, where you put the objectives, and a lot of
Yeah,
that comes from knowing what to expect from the other warband and like making some guesses as to what they've got in their objective deck and all that sort of thing. But that's one of
gotcha.
the like you said, there's the complication of the complexity, where it's a fairly complicated game, but it does allow for some uh, pretty substantial depth as far as that goes. So it feels like there's a lot. I've played a ton, and I kind of don't hold a candle to some of the guys who are men and women who play a lot more, and have a deeper understanding of the game. So
Hmm.
it's cool to have that like room to grow, I guess, has been my experience with it. So
Hmm.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think it's fair to say that the game is deep rather than
Yeah.
broad. Although it's kind of broad, I guess too. Um, and I think by having that deck building aspect, it ends up being a little bit like Magic, where it's like the starter decks. It's like, yeah, I can figure this out, and then you like jump into the deep end, and you're like, oh my, there is so
Right.
much here. uh, how am I ever going to learn all of this? And I guess I would say to folks who are interested in the game, like if you like the strategy and the deck building with something like Magic the Gathering, like if you want to stick with this game, there is more than enough to keep you occupied. My Discord channels would tell me that people talk about this literally 24/7. So uh, if
yeah, silence those notifications if you want to
yeah,
sleep. Yeah.
seriously. Um, but yeah, so I mean, so I guess it's maybe a little silly to ask, but like, did you come out of this with a favorite warband? It sounds like you really only got to play just one of the two, but do you have a preference, or are you really just sort of stuck with the one?
Well, I mean, looking across at what Sal is usually doing and how he thwarts me, I don't know if it's a grass is greener at this point, but I feel like his warband is much stronger than mine. And I think like for me, like if I were to start customizing, I think the Stormcasters. I think like the way I like to play is kind of cagey,
Mm,
and I would probably load them up with defense and move them back and just lob shots at the other guys. And I think if I were to be able to start customizing and start creating that kind of deck, I would like I could definitely see this as being one of my favorite war bands. Like I don't know exactly if that's possible if as you get more into it, but that's probably what I would enjoy that kind of a play.
Yeah, well, it's definitely is possible, and I
Okay,
think
okay,
that shows that you're picking up on what they can do. I don't know that anybody's really like delved deeply into them yet, just because
yeah,
I think the Stormcast you mentioned they're kind of slow, and um, I think a lot of the Stormcast warbands have all kind of had that same problem, if you want to call it a problem. I think any of these factions can all be fine, and they can all play well. Um, but I do think they get left maybe to the wayside for those same reasons. But I think you're definitely right in feeling like you could sort of turtle up with them and uh, build kind of a fortress strategy. So it's cool to see that even just in 4 games, you can start to feel like that's a thing that you could build towards. So one other thing that I wanted to get get your opinion on, or just know how did it go for you. So the game. So we've talked about all the different pieces of the game and some of the different mechanics of the game. For actually sitting down and playing through a game, how did it feel? How long did it take? You've got your 3 rounds and 4 different activations and all the power steps and reactions in there. Like, how is the flow? How long did you feel like you needed to actually sit down, set up, play through a game?
That's a good question. I think I want to say that we can knock out a game in about 45 minutes. But I don't know if I've looked at the clock when I've done it.
Sure.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it could be pretty fast if I knew what I was doing. But at this point, with the referencing the rules book and everything, I feel like maybe we're 45 minutes to an hour on a game.
Yeah.
That sounds about right. It kind of advertises as you could do it in 30 minutes. It takes like pretty crisp experienced play to get down to 30, and even players who've play a lot in a tournament setting probably don't get down to 30 all that often. Some do.
Okay.
Yeah. I would agree with that. I tell people at our league that, like, people who are sort of aspiring to go to bigger tournaments, and I know that that's sort of the direction they want to go in.
Mm-hmm.
I've started to tell them, okay, let's try and play at like tournament speed. And so they're like, okay, so like an hour, 45 minutes. And I'm like, well,
no.
You got 3 games in an hour and a half. So,
oh wow,
you got to be able to aim for 30. And if you go a little over, it's okay, because usually it's a best of 3, so you may not play 3 games. But
yeah, that's a fair point that we haven't made, is that in a tournament environment, this game is usually a best of 3 with the intention of kind of evening out some of the variance with how your deck draws or how your dice go. And then there's a fun aspect there of, in your case, you guys are playing with pre-built decks, so you have a sense of, as you play more and more games, you have a sense of, hey, Sal's trying to do this with his Wraith Creepers, and he's got,
right.
Pop's trying to do this. And so that same sort of thing is happening on the fly during a tournament where you're like, oh, all right, they brought this faction which normally does this thing, but they've kind of got this twist on it. So in game 2, I'm going to try and work against that. So that's another aspect that gets roped in.
Oh yeah, I could definitely see that adding a lot. Like if we were playing multiple games and I knew to take out the Viceroy as soon as possible, like
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, solid. So I mean, that sounds like, covering all the bases, you're figuring out all the different pieces, you're playing in a, normal amount of time. It's not like it's taking an inordinate amount of time. I guess we've got just some general questions, but before we dive into that, like, do you just have a general opinion of the game after having tried out just from the starter set?
Yeah, I mean, I can definitely see myself. I think I can see myself going further, picking up more war bands. I think with just like Warhammer in general is pretty intimidating, coming
Fair.
at it from the outside. Right, like with the model, like if you walk in and see a Warhammer display, you're like, whoa, this is a lot. Like, I'm going to be painting all this, and like, what's so I would say like this was a good way to like put my toe in and like start to understand like this intense lore that is going on with the game, or at least to just know that there is an intense lore going on with the game. And then start to get this idea of like, okay, there's these war bands, and I can have fun by purchasing new ones, and each war band does not appear to be, they're like $30 like that won't break the bank, which I think was maybe my wall about getting into Warhammer, was like, I've already sunk a bunch of money into Imperial Assault. Like, am I going to go and, am I going to start spending money on something else? So this was one that kind of like carries you in and says, here's your path forward, and it's not going to crush you to like get really into this game.
Yeah. And I think that's so there's two things there that I think are worth mentioning further. But so I think there is an affordability if you just want to
Yeah.
just be able to play the game. Now, I think it's fair to mention that if you're going to try and play at like the highest level of competitive play, there tends to be certain cards that you need, and because the cards only come in like certain packs, you kind of end up needing to buy a good amount of them. So there is sort of this spectrum of like, if I just want to be able to play the game and have fun, I can pick up just the stuff that I want and just, not really care about being super competitive, and I just get to go roll some dice. On the other hand, if you feel like you need to
Right.
buy every single pack that comes out, you're buying year round just to have all the cards. So
Yeah.
there is a range of money to be spent on this, and you can sort of get off the carousel wherever you feel is appropriate.
Right.
Yeah.
And then there's the hobby side as well, which I think is something that's worth mentioning here. I mean, you said Warhammer maybe is a bit intimidating, but
I know when I brought the figures over, or when I brought the box over, I also brought like a set of tools. Is like, hey, you're gonna need these clippers, this knife, this glue, because I think, if I'm correct, this is kind of the first. I think maybe I got you one other. Was it
Yes.
Director Krennic or
Yep.
something like that? Yeah, that might have been your first model that you had to like actually assemble, and so. I think what Phil was getting at here is like, what did you think of the miniatures, like as far as appearance and then assembly and all that sort of that full aspect, the hobby aspect? Because you have painted your entire Imperial Assault set, which is a substantial accomplishment, and
That was a lot.
so you've gone from like not painting anything to painting a ton of stuff, for different things. So what was your take on the miniature aspect?
Well, the initial miniatures with the ones in the box, they were cool, and they're different enough. Like the storm chasers kind of look the same to me, and it seemed I wasn't excited about them as much as I was the glaive wraiths, I think is what they're called. Those guys look like they would be really fun to paint. Like you could pick some cool colors to dress those guys up. And then the Grima, the Snarlfang
Ripa's
guy,
Snarlfangs,
Ripas, yeah.
yeah.
Those miniatures are really cool. I
They're
like
kind of amazing, yeah.
the fur on the wolves. Like
Yeah.
that is cool. And then their little goblin faces. I really appreciate that because that looks very like kind of Lord of the Rings, like old school goblin faces, like impish kind of. Yeah.
for sure. And so I guess so you, like you said, sort of dip your toe in the water here. Do you feel like there's an avenue here for just building on the hobby side, and like feeling like this is a good avenue for starting to figure out if you like modeling or painting?
Yeah, I think right. It's going to be sort of that process of like, I think, if you were to pick it up and then I think the first time you bring it home, you're going to be like, oh, wait, I got to go figure out these, what are the tools that I need to pick up? And then what's the stuff that you put in the cracks in the model?
Green stuff.
Green stuff. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, I could definitely like, oh, well, I'll have to learn about green stuff because all my model, like I didn't, like, it's kind of hard to get it right on the perfect like fit for the models. I think I
Yeah.
was off a
Yeah,
little bit on mine. But yeah, I think it's an easy way. And cause they're only like 3 or 4 people per pack, like it's not an exhaustive amount. Like it's, that you feel like, oh my gosh, I've got so much to paint. It's like 3 guys and there's enough variation, and kind of get some fun tools. And I think it's the way they've done it is a good way to bring you in and not overwhelm you again with with the hobbying side, make it more approachable.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, I think that is definitely part of the approach there, is to have it be an easier entryway. So I'm glad that it works out that way for you. Um, so we've asked, I mean, we sort of covered a lot of the questions here. I think the only things we've got left are just some of the questions of like, what were some of your favorite moments, favorite parts of playing the game, and then any feelings on like how does it do for replayability if you just have the starter box?
Okay. I think, well, I didn't mention this. I did mention that the first time I played against Davey, all the stuff, we didn't mention the result. Like,
Oh,
I ended up winning that, match.
oh,
And, it was like the entire time my guys are just trying to get to the fight, and we finally got to the fight. And then I had some, I don't know how I did it, but I had the right objective cards. And so I think my favorite all time memory was when Davey kind of looked at me when we realized what the score was. And he was like, "What the?" And I was like, "Oh, oh, that was genuine. Like, he didn't see that coming. All right. That feels good." So yeah, I think that was my favorite memory overall. But and I think in playing with this, is I re- it's the process of Sal loading up his Viceroy and me being like, I can sense myself doing it where I'm like, wait, what does that card say again? And what card do you have? And wait, what is that? And he's like very patiently, and he just turned 10. Like, he's just very patiently like taking me through the process as he gets this bigger and bigger smile on his face where I'm like, oh my God, you just wiped out my guy. Cause he's a one shot kind of guy. Like, if he can build up a guy to do it in one shot, like that's his favorite kind of guy to play. So
picking up on the popular strategies.
yeah, yeah. So I think that's been where I get to just watch him sort of decimate me and have a lot of joy on his side. Yeah.
Nice, nice.
Was that Sal's favorite moment? I think some of his questions were on that. And did he have a favorite moment? Was it just the flip side, the mirror of that? Is
Pretty
watching you.
much. Yeah. 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 I think he mentioned, I don't know exactly what the card does, but he mentioned the murder pack
Oh
upgrade.
yeah,
And he's
jeez.
like, if I can get the murder pack on my Viceroy, I'm like, and now I'm kind of looking at that card like, oh my God, that does do a lot of stuff, doesn't it? All right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Nothing like hearing your 10-year-old talk about murder pack.
Oh yeah, I just love those murder packs.
If I can get into a murder pack, Dad, everything's going to be all right.
Awesome. Well,
Yeah.
unless I missed anything, I think we pretty much ran it all down. Davey, did you have any other questions or any other bits of the box you wanted to cover before we wrapped up here?
No, I think we've kind of hit everything in context one way or the other. Aaron, do you have any more thoughts you wanted to share on it, or should we start to wrap this thing up?
Well, the only other thing, like, I am getting the sense that as I looked at, I think tomorrow Sal is going to take out Ripa's snarl fangs and lay waste to me, um, which will lead to me doing a little bit of research and buying my next warband through them. So I'm
There
like,
you
okay,
go.
I see how it's going to work here, right? Like,
Yeah.
it's
It's an
just going to
arms
be
race.
a arms race. Yeah, yeah. So I'm getting excited for that.
All
Awesome.
right, cool. That's actually a good segue because we talked about if you're someone who is new to this or someone who's just starting out, you may be wondering what's next on here. And Aaron's already talked about it here. They've made it pretty easy. You can grab a warband and they will come with a pre-built deck, so you don't have to. They're two stacks wrapped up. One, so like Ripples will come with here's 32 cards. They are it's a pre-built deck for Ripa, and then here's some universals that you can then mix into any deck that you have. And part of what gives any warband its flavor is not just their fighters, but the cards that are specific to that warband.
Mm-hmm.
So there's that. Another real good buy early on is there's a essentials pack, which are 60, Phil. Am I right? 60 cards.
Yeah, 60, I want to say. I've got the box right here.
All right. 60 cards that are, if tournament legal is a thing that's important to you, they're evergreen as well. But there are a lot of cards that are just generally useful, and so that's a real easy thing to pick up. And they've kept the complexity on those relatively low, so they're a real good companion for the starter set or whatever warbands you pick up. And if you're sharing like you guys are, then you guys get to fight over
Right.
the cards themselves. So
Yeah.
and the only thing I'd say is each season, each year is a new season. Each season they have a box set to start it off, and those are usually pretty good value too. They have a lot of universals, they have some new boards, and they have 2 war bands, and it's generally to pick that up. And the 2 war bands end up being kind of cheaper than buying 2 separately. So it's a thing to keep your eye out for if they particularly appeal to you. But I think the cool thing is you can just find a warband that you like the models for and throw it into the mix. So
Cool.
Definitely.
Yeah. Phil, you got anything to add there?
Yeah, I think the only other thing is that if you, as a new player, if you really do just love the game and you find that you really want to dig in more, one, know that there are some additional things that come along with jumping into the more competitive side of the game. There's some resources on Games Workshop's website for cards that are restricted. So as you're building decks, eventually you do have to worry about certain limitations to what cards you're allowed to include. So that's sort of like maybe 3 steps down the line here. But if you find that you really like the game and you want to sort of progress in that direction, that's sort of the next piece to look at. And I guess then the other side of that is that you if you get into that side of the game, you do then have to start to think about plotting out like what purchases make sense. The game does, like, so Davey referenced that there are seasons, and in the competitive side, going along with those seasons, they also rotate the cards out, so you have this sort of shifting set that you're allowed to play with.
Just similar if you're familiar with Magic the Gathering at the high levels of that competitive thing, they'll rotate what season, or not seasons, but what sets of cards. So.
Yeah. So exactly the same concept, and it's just when you get to that point, it's good to know like where are we in a season? Like, do you necessarily want to go and pick up something that you?
The caveat being that all the war bands, like from the very start of the game, all the war bands and the war band specific stuff are all valid. So you unless they change something, picking up Rippas, you'll be able to play Rippas for the rest of the life of the game.
Yep. So you can always play the warbands you like, and there will just be some card rotation that happens. So that kind of gives you your easy path if you want to continue through the game. But that's all I've got. Any other thoughts?
No, I think we can close it out.
All right. Well, as always, if you would like to get in touch with us to share any of your thoughts or anything else that you'd like to let us know, you can reach us on Twitter at WTHcast or whatthehexcast@gmail.com. If you'd like to learn any more about this lore stuff that we were talking about, or any other this deep dive into the Warhammer universe, feel free to check out all of our other content at themortalrealms.com. As we mentioned, Dogs of Warcry is hopefully going to be starting up soon. So if you are interested in what this Warcry thing might be, or if you're already a fan, go check those out. Some good listening there.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks. Also, we have some patrons. I'm never sure what the noun is, but we kind of keep it as a general pool, so people contribute to the network as a whole. and that's been pretty awesome. So
Yeah,
thanks to them.
definitely. So obviously, if you're interested in joining the Patreon, that's greatly appreciated. But think of it as a tip jar. There's never anything expected. Um, and if you just are a fan of the show and you'd like to show that, we also have some merch. You can buy a T-shirt or a sweatshirt if you'd like for any of the different shows. You can also find those linked out at themortalrealms.com. Coming up next, what are we doing, Davey? I think we're still keeping it pretty loose here.
Yeah, we'll see where the spirit moves us. Kind of depends on what guests we get available and what what we want to do. So we're going to keep it fresh, keep it surprising.
Yeah, keep you on your toes. I guess in that vein, we are coming up to the end of a season. Well, we're at the end of a season here, I guess. Really, we had the last warband drop probably about a month ago now. So we've obviously been covering a lot of the different warbands and all the different releases that came out in the past 6 months or so. But if there's anything you'd like to hear us talk about, or if there's any topics that we have already talked about and you'd like us to talk about more, let us know. Let us know what you'd like to hear, because ultimately, you as the listeners are the ones that we're trying to, cater this content for. And I guess on the topic of listening to things, Davey, do you have a recommended listening for this episode?
That was a pro level segue. So. Yeah, sure. Recommend listening. Welcome to the Occupation by REM from Document.
Nice. Well, for this episode of What the Hex, I've been Phil.
I've been Davey.
I've been Aaron.
And that's mostly because like I need fuel for my outtakes. Really early on when we started doing this, I would we were pretty bad, and so there'd be a bunch of outtakes that I'd put at the end. We've gotten better, and so I don't actually have a ton of outtakes. So I usually try and glean something from the pregame chat or whatever. So.
I set up a little chair roadblock at the basement door, but I don't think that's gonna do much. He's gonna be like, "Why is there all this stuff here?"
That's just a challenge.